All right, good afternoon, everybody. I am Susan Broker, and I work with the City of Savannah proudly. And I want to welcome all of you here today. This is an important day. It's a day that's been a long time coming. A lot of folks have worked really hard to get to where we are. First things first, I see a couple people doing this. We have turned the air down. You'll be happy to know, so it's going to get a little bit cooler in here. I hope so in the next couple of minutes. So before we really get into the meat of this, I want to take a few moments to acknowledge some folks who have participated in this. First, I believe I saw Alderman Dietrich Leggett come in, and I saw Alderman Nick Palumbo come in. Thank you for being here and your leadership. We certainly appreciate it. Are there any other aldermen here that I did not? I said Leggett. I got Leggett. Okay, all right. So thank you. We also have some city staff here who have worked very hard over the last year. Well, always. City staff always works hard. I would just like for them to raise your hand if you work for the City of Savannah. Proudly, wave it up high. It's a great organization. That's right. They deserve a round of applause. So this has been a partnership and a collaboration between the city and the community. We've worked over the last, now it's been 12 months to get to this point. In May of 2022, the mayor and aldermen approved a contract to have city staff engage with a consultant, and that consultant is Responsible Hospitality Institute. And they are really the world's leading consultant that works on nighttime issues for municipalities and communities. They go into communities and they do an assessment and they say, you know, this is what we've seen in your community and here's how we think you might want to improve some things. In this report, you'll see there's some things that are kind of hard for us to hear, right? If you've taken the time to read through the report, there are some things that were difficult for city staff to hear because we try to do our best all the time. And so, but we're willing to take a look at ourselves and determine what can we do better. And so when the mayor and aldermen gave that green light, we engaged with Responsible Hospitality Institute and launched a year-long process. We've talked to neighborhoods, we've talked to residents, we've talked to business owners, we've talked to nonprofit organizations. We've tried to be as far-reaching as we possibly could be so that we could gain the perspectives from so many different viewpoints. And I think that's what this report reflects and represents. And so today we're going to get into a little bit of the details of the report. Now, this is a summary finding. This isn't a directive that you must do this. There are things in this report we may not do. There are things that we may change. There are items that may not be as important anymore. And most importantly, there are items on these lists for us to do that are already being done. And so I want to acknowledge our Department of Revenue, Judy Jones and Megan and the crew. They are already working on the server training. They're already working on the bar cards. So, and in fact, next week is an alcohol stakeholder meeting. There are 3 meetings next week, so if you're an alcohol establishment, you need to look on our website and see information about that. But some of these things are already being done. So I'm very proud of that. At the end of the day, this is about balance and compliance. We know that Savannah has an incredible nighttime economy. We have a great place to live. We have a great place to play. We know that a lot goes on. But you know, traditionally, the city offices, other than public safety, close at 5 and on weekends. We need to think about what services we can provide that creates balance of quality of life, balance of nighttime activity, balance of things like noise and you know, disruption, public safety. We want compliance from the people that are operating downtown. We want to make sure our tour guides are operating the way they should, our businesses are operating the way they should. And so as we go through this, you know, Jocelyn Kane, who is our representative here from Responsible Hospitality Institute, is going to go through the details of the report, and then we'll have an opportunity to have some Q&A and really talk about what does this mean and how long will it take, and you know, what are your priorities, things of that nature. So I'm going to turn it over to Jocelyn, and we're going to let her go through the presentation, and then we'll do our Q&A. And I also, lastly, want to recognize Alderwoman Keisha Gibson Carter, who just joined us. Thank you for your leadership and attendance. And with that, oh, I'm sorry. You had your hat down. I'm so sorry, Alderwoman Lanier. I couldn't see you with your hat. So anyway, I will be quiet. I've talked enough. I'm going to let Jocelyn come up and go through the report, and then we'll get back to you with some Q&A. Thank you.
Okay. I need that.
Yes, you do.
Oh.
Okay, that can go in your pocket. I feel like I'm putting a boutonniere on you.
That's right. Now we're engaged.
And then put that in your pocket.
Is this on? Is this on? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. I'm super happy to be here again. I love Savannah, just so you know. I've been to a lot of cities, and I live in California, but this is such a joy to come here. And I just want to say that your hospitality is unmatched. And we had a great time doing this work. So with that, I will just get into it, I hope, if I can figure out how to make this Eddie. I got you. Because we need to move to the next slide. Okay, so I need to do that. All right, great. So the scope of this work, as you can see, and I'll try to not move around too much, was the downtown historic core and the social clusters, including City Market and Plant Riverside. They were primary, but other social districts were also represented, including Starland. And we did community engagement much more widespread because the social economy impacts everybody. And so, as Susan said, many meetings with residents, businesses, nonprofits, and not just reps from downtown, but Habersham Village, as you can see, Filer Park, Cloverdale, Carver Village, and Tatumville. We spent quite a bit of time having conversations, and again, everyone was really forthcoming, and we really appreciate that. We did 3 site visits, right, between May and October. We, I feel like it was more than 100 people, but we talked to many people, many organizations, had 30 total meetings, so we tried to be as expansive as possible, with virtual interviews as well, and then a women's focus group, and venue operators meeting, because again, all of these stakeholders are as important as everybody, and the neighborhood engagement in particular was vital. So we also were here, and we didn't just talk about nightlife. We went out and observed nightlife. We waited. We were out till closing, and then because I like nightlife, I went out a lot more than that, just to see, right? And we did police ride-alongs, which was a great experience, and thanks to the police department for that. This report, as you know, is an action plan. It was created by this community of everyone who lives, works, and plays in Savannah. It's hospitality businesses, residents, tourism, Mercer University, Urban Development Authority, county government. We had really good participation. We do go to cities where very few people show up, not in Savannah. Everybody showed up to let us know what they needed, and we were super grateful for that. Okay. The report findings look like this. This is the brief report. Hopefully everyone got a copy of, and there are links. If you scan this massive QR code, you will go right to a digital version of that. When we come to a city, we use a framework because nightlife is not just venues, and it's not just police, and it's not just neighbors, right? It's everybody. So we use 4 core measures, and then we'd use, or 6 core measures, and a underpinning of foundation, planning, safety, and vibrancy in order to capture, as you can see, right, all of the stakeholders. And hopefully anyone who is involved in this process, in our listening sessions and our actioning roundtables, knew where they fell in this framework. And it works to stay organized, because you can end up going into eddies if you aren't careful, because it's a complicated thing, social economies. So what we came out with, and I'm going to get more specific, right, is a 24-point action plan, which I'll say is quite a bit, and it's good that there were so many areas where we felt like, progress can get made, and the creativity, I think, of the folks who came to the meetings helped us to flesh out as many sort of action points as this. So just to get super clear, I'm just going to go through them, and then we're going to do Q&A. So I think we're going to wait till the end. So hold your questions, but make a note. In order to lay a foundation, again, for the long-term strategies that are laid out, one of our actions is to suggest that the city launch a Savannah Office of Nightlife. And I guess I'm not going to go super deep into it, but Susan, if you want to speak to that later on a little bit more, and specifically, these are offices that are all over the country, and they allow these actions to land somewhere. One of the things we do when we come to cities is bring an action plan, and often people are like, well, who's going to do all that? And the best place we feel is to create an office that looks and oversees all of this complicated stuff, to be a place for people to go, for residents to call, for venues to call, for police to work with, to liaise. It's basically a liaison. We often suggest that an advisory board be created of the stakeholders, the complicated bunch of stakeholders, so that they can help guide that Office of Nightlife. We are suggesting to do an economic analysis of your social economy. We all know that it's important, and we all know that it's large, but we really want to know what the value is in numbers, and we also really want to know how many people work in this industry. Jobs are a great story and super important, because these aren't just any jobs. They're jobs that allow any spectrum of socioeconomic status. People can come with a little bit of education or a lot of education and get into a really generally decent paying job in this social economy. So it's really important. And then we're going to suggest in Action 4 that the city explore sources of funding to support that social economy and offices of nightlife, as opposed to take it from somewhere else. Potentially look for, and again in the larger report there's some ideas around that, but finding a way so it's self-sustaining, which is really important to do. And we think that there are some ways here, obviously a conversation for down the line. When we get into public safety actions, we suggest that not everything fall to police after 5 p.m. So to create a multidisciplinary team approach to public safety at night, to establish a sustainable alliance, to engage a broad continuum of safety partners in recognition that the limited resources and officer shortage in police departments is real. So it's important to see what functions are falling to the police that possibly could be done by other city staff. We are asking or suggesting to create a dedicated downtown nightlife police unit. This is often really important because there needs to be sustainability and continuity in policing downtown and a familiarity with the different kinds of issues. So this is something we see in lots of cities, and again, the report will show you some examples of where this happens. We did a lot of talking about how the off-duty officer system inside venues works, and sometimes doesn't work or is challenged. And so we are asking or suggesting that you explore changes or improvements, not necessarily take it all away. In some cities, it's not allowed at all, but it's obviously up to your community as to whether that system is the best way to secure nightlife venues. And then, this is, I think, already happening, hosting educational forums between venues and safety agencies. Those relationships are often fraught with negative, right? Because they're responding to something bad that happened. And we believe for like constant communication between venues and safety agencies, not just police, but fire or anybody else who feels that venues don't understand why they're doing what they're doing, or venues need to be heard. It's worth spending some time with venues to explain why. Otherwise, in that vacuum, they come up with alternative realities about why agencies do things sometimes, and it's probably inaccurate. So it works really well. In terms of the venues themselves, and we did have listening sessions and actioning with venue safety specifically, not just operator, not just owners, but people who work in security and safety in venues who see everything. We are suggesting developing an accreditation process for server training, and I think Susan mentioned that some of this is actually happening, and I believe that Judy Jones can maybe speak more about that or not, if it's something that's already happening, to reinstate a server registry. And a lot of this has to do, right, with like understanding that staff is trained and understands their responsibilities to serve, right, responsibly. And so then through our women's focus group, we learned, right, about the vulnerabilities that women in particular feel going out at night, and not obviously just Savannah, everywhere. Women look at nightlife very differently than men. And so we are recommending creating a sexual violence prevention program for social venues because it's just, again, more education, more awareness, something that's really important and something that's uncomfortable to talk about, but is really, really a big deal. So those are the 3 under venue safety. Is everyone like following along? Is everyone good? Okay. I feel like I'm just blathering on. Planning for people, and this is where we talk about quality of life. And this is, as you can see, robust, and there's quite a bit here. We heard a lot about the 311 system and what it does and what it should do or could do better. So we are suggesting that the 311 system be improved as a resource for residents and not just visitors. And there is a tension, right, in all cities, but in particular where there's a lot of tourists and visitors. In Savannah is one of those. I live in a city also that's millions and millions of people come every year to enjoy the amazing hospitality, right, that you have here and everything you've got to offer, but have different needs than residents do. And so 311 was being used in what we heard by more visitors than residents, and residents weren't feeling the value as much as they could. We also are suggesting that you revive an ambassador program that used to exist essentially in the downtown to assist people in, finding their way, going to the right place, acting appropriately, all the different things. That's a complicated request. That's a complicated recommendation. Again, the report has more about what does that look like and what kind of concerns people might have. And we're talking about it at night. We're not talking about in the day. We're talking about in the dark. So it is something you used to have, and we understood it worked very well. So good consideration to bring that back potentially. We heard, particularly in downtown, about impacts from short-term vacation rentals, or Airbnb, like people like to call it. And this is, again, something we see all over the country. STVRs, as they're called, change communities substantially. They change what was a neighborhood into like a business, right, area, because people aren't consistently the same. They go in and out. There's parties, there's noise, there's trash. And so this is something that bears some consideration. And I think your city has definitely lots of rules and things around that. But again, we're sort of feeding back what we heard, thinking that maybe there's some more consideration that could be placed there. Improve notification systems to residents about new venues. And this has to do, right, with when something new, when there's a new application, whatever license or you know, whether it's construction or alcohol licensing or whatever, that residents feel as if there's surprises and they would like better notice however it's done, right? Whether it's mailings or some kind of social media or some kind of email system or something. Again, there's examples in the report around how to do this, but residents, I'd say generally people aren't thrilled with surprises, and certainly surprises that have potential impacts on their sort of quality of life. So more notice is always better. A lighting assessment, and this is obviously related to safety as much as quality of life, but where there's dark spaces, things feel unsafe. And it doesn't mean it is, but it feels that way. And the perception of safety and then the ability to light it up, and we've seen around Ellis Square, right, this lighting works very well to keep it feeling safer and to maybe not allow some things that people shouldn't be doing to be happening in the dark spaces. So conducting assessment to see where are our dark spots, where does it feel unsafe would be a really great thing to do. And then lastly, connect visitors and venues with social service resources. And I think this has in some ways to do with some of the unhoused issues, and you know, not just looking to arrest people, but connect them with social services that you have very much so in this city to help people who are in need, as opposed to just removing them, right, from the areas that we're talking about. Okay, mobility is a big one that people don't really think about, but when we come to a city, we have to ask ourselves, how do people come to these social cluster areas and how do they leave? And so we want to talk about transit systems, we want to talk about like Ubers and Lyfts, we want to talk about how people move. So expanding mobility service to and from downtown to the arena was something, because we obviously went to End Market Arena and we heard a lot about the planning and for that, but then this ability to move between the arena and downtown seemed limited, and so that bears some expansion. We heard about parking services and their ability to tow cars away, in particular downtown at closing, when we see a lot of people, right, coming out onto the streets at closing time, and there being, you know, cars that are in the way for a variety of reasons, not just for flow, but also for safety reasons. And safety officials often don't want parked cars outside of venues for fear of what's in those cars sometimes. So it's unclear when there's the need to move a car, who can tow it. So we are, and again, some of this may already be in the works, but identified this as sort of a confusion and a need to authorize others to tow than the police, because it takes a lot of time for them. Improving communication on street closures for events, and this again came, I think, primarily from neighbors, but also from businesses, to be able to be aware of when street closings happen. And again, this is just flow of information, education back and forth, just really kind of not surprising people with things that they could have planned around if they knew. So this is, again, always this work in progress, and every city is communicating because there's always something that comes up. A city needs to, you know, get somewhere and do something for whatever reason. It's one priority over another, and so communication for those kinds of things could be improved. And then creating a rideshare hub for closing time, and we talk about this a lot when people come out, and rideshares, their model is to come to you wherever you are. But if everyone's in the same place, they can't all get there. So to put some order to the chaos, sort of like a taxi stand used to be, right? There are these things called rideshare hubs that can be created, and it requires sort of communicating with Lyft and Uber, right, so that it tells the person when they hit the button, walk to, like you do, I think, in all airports nowadays, and then having some managed, because there are conflicts that happen when people are waiting. People get in the wrong cars a lot because they don't know whose is whose, and having a few drinks, you never know. So rideshare hubs are a great way to avoid some of those conflicts. Okay, where are we? Yeah, enhance vibrancy. Okay, we're going to move to the venues, because they're a really important part of this. So social venues, whether it's restaurants or bars or nightclubs or whatever the term you want to use, we see great benefit in creating communication and organization amongst venues. And so there was, we were told, a Savannah Nightlife Association at one time, and we are suggesting to revive and sustain a nightlife association, with that membership being whatever those folks who decide to take that leadership role want it to be. So it's a really great way for the city, right, to communicate to venues, and then also for venues to put their agenda out so that the city can respond. We heard a lot about creating nighttime recreational opportunities for youth. We know that some of the violence that has happened in the past were not from venue patrons, but from kids who came down to Ellis Square or that downtown vibrant, fun party area, but didn't have anything sort of positive to do, and then there were conflicts, and they brought some conflicts with them. And so we heard right, interruptions and or recreational opportunities would be really important and vital. And I think there are definitely some nonprofits out there, and there are organizations, I don't think you need to start from scratch, to offer some of that to kids, particularly in summer, so that they don't come down to a place where they can't get into a venue and make their own, activities downtown that people are uncomfortable with. And then, as far as public space is concerned, activating public space with public art is always a great thing to do. Nothing dramatic about that, but again, also a way to take some of that dark area if we think about lighting it up, and just like murals and public art is always just a great thing. You guys have beautiful squares and gorgeous infrastructure, I think, so you don't want to take away from that, but you can add more vibrancy with public art. So I am now coming to the end. Again, you can access the report, and there's a brief and a long version if you really want to go deep, because it's over 100 pages on that website right there. And that is, again, detailed action plans, stakeholders that we suggest bringing together, steps, like pretty detailed sort of implementation steps, and most importantly, resources and model examples where other cities are doing things. You might look at those and, again, as Susan said, say, that's not really the way we do things here, and that's totally fine. This report, again, is, like additional information for you to use as you see fit. So I'm going to stop there, and then I'm going to have Susan handle Q&A.
Yes. Before we get into the Q&A, I did want to take a moment and kind of summarize again what I said at the beginning. Just as, if you read the full report, which I would encourage you to do, it is 130 pages, but there are a lot of pictures. So, so take some time to read through that and some of the details, because the action items that Jocelyn just went over are pretty broad-reaching, kind of 30,000-foot level things, and it's going to take a lot of work to do some of those things. And what they suggest in the report is just that, suggestions. Like she said, they're going to suggest something that we don't necessarily agree with how to go about doing something. So that's going to be for us. That's going to be for our community, for Savannahans to figure out what it is and how we want to proceed. And the other thing is, take a look at it, from the lens of, from your own personal lens, and then also as a city staff person, looking at that, thinking about what it is that we do every day as city staff and how we can enhance and improve that, because they didn't hold back on telling us where we need some enhancements. And so we have to take a good look at ourselves and figure out how to do that. So, but I will open it up for questions and answers.
Hi, my name is Andrew Jones. I'm the chair of the Open Core Plan Coalition, downtown group. And one thing that seems to be missing here is any discussion of noise. As a resident, the biggest problem with nightlife is noise coming from three main sources: rooftop cafes, like the Home Suites down on Bay Street. That goes on till midnight. And with my windows closed, it's louder than my television. There are festivals in the trustees' garden. I could mouth the words of the songs, again, with my windows closed. I'm 5 blocks away. It's that loud. We also have the problem of people after nightlife driving around the downtown, the windows open, blasting music out up until 2 in the morning, and there's no way to get anything done about that. So there needs to be something done about the after nightlife and the effect that that has on all the neighborhoods. And there's also a problem with the noise of these cars, these base line of the cars where literally your house will shake. And in New York City, it was so bad in Greenwich Village that the city had an ordinance that if you were up a certain level of decibels, your car would be confiscated. And I think we need to have something like that. People should not have to lose people who live in their own homes.
Okay, thank you. Those are excellent points. And so I'm going to try to answer, answer as best I can. Number one, sound was a big part of our conversation, certainly. The city of Savannah for the last year has been looking at modifying the sound ordinance. This is something, the sound ordinance is something that is very broad reaching. The way it's written, if you are talking at this level and someone can hear you, you're basically in violation of the noise ordinance. So it's pretty restrictive. But we also know that different sound is acceptable in different times and in different locations. And that's where we want to get with our sound ordinance. And that's what we're going to be working on. Okay, so I can use this now?
Oh, there you go.
Thank you, Alderman Leggett. Oh, there you go. Now, the cruising and the cars. So years ago, when I've been with the city 25 years, dating myself, but we did have a problem with that, really bad, on River Street and Rock Street in particular. And we did an operation with PD where we had an anti-cruising campaign. And so that is something that I think, looking at my PD partner over there, that we can look at it. I think that also having the transportation hub is a real possibility. We know that everybody gets out of a bar around the same time, let's say between 2 and 3:30 in the morning. And because, we like our to-go cups, oftentimes the last drink we get is going to be in a to-go cup. So that means we're going to stand on the street, we're going to have our last drink with a group of people, it's going to be a little bit louder, we're going to call our Ubers or our Lyfts. What we want to do, and what has worked in other communities, is to move those people over to an area where they can maybe get some food, get away from the bars and that nightlife activity, and get in a situation where the Uber and Lyft are waiting for them. I'm hopeful that will help. And then finally, I think, to me, and like I said, I've been here a long time, but to me, nothing happens successfully or effectively without communication and without dialogue. And I know that that can be touchy-feely for a lot of people. But what we heard over and over again is, we don't trust this, we don't trust that. And so we've got a job to do to gain the trust of, maybe nightlife operators and people like that. And I think as we continue to do this, as we continue to build these relationships with these people, that solutions will start to come out of that. I can already attest to one nightlife venue in particular that we didn't know before this process. And this individual had issues with sound outside of his establishment, just all kinds of things going on. They called us, we were able to facilitate a solution between PD and them and code compliance. There's a link you know, and we want to do that and provide that link. I think doing some of these things wrong. That's a long answer, sorry.
Well, and if I can add, we did spend quite a bit of time talking, and we always spend a lot of time talking about sound. And I call it sound, people call it noise. It is called a noise ordinance for sure, but it could be called a sound ordinance because some, you know, people have different ideas of what is acceptable. But I think part of the problem, and this is we did address, right, is this idea of who's working after 5. Because these are when your problems are happening. And this is part of that 311 conversation. So it's sort of tangentially, but we did try to address it without the obvious, hey, your sound ordinance, you know, needs beefing. I think your sound ordinance is probably robust, as is the enforcement of that and the compliance. And so in large part, because it's a big, you know, hand-holding to a certain extent of all of these stakeholders, it's really important to be able to communicate with venues, and so having them organized is super important. And also, back to this idea of an Office of Nightlife, because you're calling the police or you're calling 311 and there's no, or code compliance comes the next day and the sound is not there anymore. Like, so these are all of a piece. And hopefully that makes some sense to you, because I don't think that this, you know, the tools are there. It's just like learning as we can also about how to get some compliance. It's not an us against them. That's what we're really aiming at, is that the social economy, everyone's rowing in the same direction, to be honest. So we all want it to work well. We all want to resolve conflict. So how do we create in Savannah, for you, I would live here in a heartbeat, I have to say, a system that's responsive as quickly as possible, which an Office of Nightlife obviously would be, but also other partners. How can you, particular noise, be as responsive as quickly? It's not, yes, it's a long-term solve, but it's also in the moment relief for neighbors, because sound is something, and I know this, and I'm going to stop talking in a second, but I spent 15 years running something called the Entertainment Commission in San Francisco. And while San Francisco is not Savannah by any means, it's a large city with a lot of venues, and I spent 15 years listening to neighbors tell me, right, that they could hear something they didn't want to hear. So the most important part is to be quickly trying to get resolution.
Is it safe for you to say that every city that you've experienced is different or unique? Because Savannah isn't in New York, Savannah isn't Dallas.
Absolutely. Every city is unique.
So
every city is unique, but every city has some commonalities when it comes to social economies. But absolutely. And
right,
again,
what happened in Dallas or New York, it will not.
She just said that.
It would not help. It would not help Mr. Jones' issue was happening at his house. You know?
Yeah, and I think that
just
was
because you might have a conversation with the nightlife or with the police, it's enforcement. If we don't have the same people coming out and following up, then we're going to continue to have the same problem.
okay. Linda?
I'm Linda Bowman, and I've lived in Savannah since 1985. Can you hear me?
Yes, Megan.
So we lived in a freestanding Victorian for 36 years. We had to move because of health reasons. And the person who bought it was going to be raising her family there. So I was really excited about that. And immediately it was turned into a short-term vacation rental. So I tried to follow up with the city about you know, what that really involved. And apparently if you stay in the house that you bought for a couple of weeks a year, it can be a short-term vacation rental. And I thought the downtown was already saturated with. So for me, it's been a real disappointment. And I saw that there was something on here about that. So I don't know what can be done, but that would be wonderful, because there are less residents in downtown now than there were when I moved here in 1985.
You're right, and we did hear a lot about the saturation of short-term vacation rentals in the downtown district, We also heard concern from other neighborhoods that are, you know, on the brink of having potential commercial activity near them. You think about like the Arena District, you know, there are properties and neighborhoods out there that are ripe for, you know, for some kind of development, and they're fearful of that very thing. And so that's why it's an action step, is because we know we have to reset, we know we have to look at it again and say, okay, what's working, what's not working, because across the board, it was something that we heard from almost every focus group that we had. So I thank you for that anecdote, Linda, because it lends itself to what we heard, and I'm hopeful that we can, through this, we'll be able to address some of that. Yes, sir.
Can you hear me without the mic?
No.
I work with a lot of youth, high school and college kids,
Yes, sir.
and what I see, I'm looking at the report, the last page is juvenile detentions, but it's not mentioning anything about the adult arrest or people that should be held more accountable. And what I see, just reading this just for a few minutes, we are providing more insulins, but not treating the cause of diabetes. And it's a cost that comes with that. An example would be Titan's last encounter. They spent $184,000 where they thought they could provide shuttle buses, charge $7 a person, actually make a profit if they can win a lot more. So, in looking at this, you may have engaged different people, but most of the people here are here because they have a personal concern that they want a better quality of life or they want more profitability. And to blame kids where the government provides grab-and-go guns or a school system is failing, you're providing insolence with police officers. Chief Mentor was here. I met some of his officers. They've been here 10 years. They couldn't say, Chuck, the guy with the bad arm, is Valley Parker, Mr. Patel, owns it. They knew no one. So I told him he had occupied army, but not a community policing force. So we have people like Captain Few, who was a lieutenant back at the time, pulling second shift. They could come and talk to a person and say, hey, let me help you get home. That's the service, instead of letting me lock you up. And I think if we change the way we get more, just one-time events, not going to happen. But this gentleman said some things. He said, it's not going to work. That's the Chris Boss approach, to say, you got a posse that says, I want a car with $1 million in a helicopter, and the guy comes on and says, you're not getting it. But one thing you can do is you can trust him because he's being honest. And that's where the distrust and the transparency start to become opaque. So if you can kind of just not make this a one-time event, but everybody collectively put the best thoughts in and we get best practices, I think we can get something done.
Well, I appreciate what you said, and thank you for sharing that. I guess I have just a couple of little things I would say. Number one, in my 25 years in the city, I have continually heard how we need to engage with youth. And the youth do need more activities and what have you. So I'm glad that appears, but I agree with you. You know, and the second thing about the officers, and you'll notice that one of the recommendations on here is to have a dedicated unit for downtown for nighttime kind of activity. And that's partly so that those relationships can be built. Now that doesn't mean it's happening all over, you know, the city. This is one little action plan or one little, you know, or two or three little areas. But the idea is, yes, we need to talk to each other. Yes, we need to provide service, not just lock somebody up. We need to, you know, create a community where people, you know, feel safe and feel like they can go to law enforcement, can go to, you know, whoever in the city and get a result or get an action. And so I hear what you're saying. I'm hopeful that there are 2 or 3 of these action plans that kind of address what you're saying. And it all depends on the strategies you use to implement that plan, that step. So that's where the conversations and the nighttime economy, or excuse me, the nighttime committee will be a good part of the solution, because there'll be new people at the table. You know, I want to see people that I've never seen engage with the city of Savannah be a part of this and be at the table to talk about it, because those are people that may have unique solutions to offer. So thank you.
Has police been brought up to speed on what we're thinking about?
Yeah, so SPD has been a part since day one of the process. And again, these are recommendations from the action plan. Chief Gunther was a part of the process, Sergeant Tagliero, Ben Heron. Is there a question?
No, that's my question. Just anybody has a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll apologize early because I haven't read the whole plan, but concerning the mobility actions items, especially regarding the new arena area, have you guys considered any sidewalks, bike lanes to and from the arena, especially from downtown? Because I know there's a lot of people that would either go downtown first and then like to maybe just meander over versus maybe getting pedicabs or walking or biking. So you don't have to implement so much parking, you don't have to implement so much Uber, and maybe if it's nice outside, they can just enjoy themselves instead of spending along the way.
So connectivity with the arena and the canal district is a priority for the city. It's not my project, so I don't want to overspeak or speak incorrectly. So I'm looking at my colleague to maybe help me out, but that is in the long-term plan, to have connectivity with sidewalks or bikeways or to the arena.
Yes, briefly, in the Canal District Master Plan, there's connectivity both to the neighborhoods to the west, to the downtown area, and a good number of them are funded through the recent increase in the property tax.
And for those of you who don't know, that this is our Chief Operating Officer, Brett Bell. He's got one back there, Jim, that I'll push him.
I've had a business downtown for 28 years, since 1995, and I'm at the Rail Hub, and there's all the buildings around me. When I opened up, were all either closed or were businesses. And then things changed, and people started moving into these apartments, which weren't apartments, they were office spaces that they made into apartments. And now we have the problem of that we're loud, and we have, our lights are too bright in our backyard, which is a safety thing for us, but we had all these issues happen, and then we talked to the police, and the police talked to us, and we got together, and everything was great. And we talked to, then the SDVRs came in, and they started complaining about that we were loud, and we were like, well, we've been doing the same thing for 20 years, and now these SDVRs are all around us. And we don't have a problem with anybody that's coming in. We take them in and we want them to be with us. But the problem we're having is that if you move into right next door to a bar and then you call the sound ordinance and you start changing the rules and the city complies with them, we have a problem with that, because how am I supposed to change my entire business plan because somebody decided that they're going to retire in downtown Savannah and sit right on top of my bar?
Well said. So thank you. Yes, and we've worked together for a long time.
Yeah.
20-something years. And I will say this, I don't know, you heard earlier, I said, one of the ways to look at the sound of the noise is that, certain sounds are appropriate in certain locations at certain times that aren't necessarily appropriate in another location at a certain time. And I think we want to dig a little bit deeper into that sound ordinance so that we can have those definitions. Well, this is appropriate, it's an entertainment zone, right? Where the rail is, it's an entertainment area. And so what's appropriate there, and your right to do your business, to have your business there and be successful, that's your right, and as a property owner, and as a business owner. So that's a completely different thing of, Market the Drive, where I grew up, Fairway Oaks. That's not, that wouldn't be appropriate. So that's where I think we want to get with the sound. And I'm hoping that we'll, through this process, we'll be able to do that, because I agree with you.
I'll just, that's okay, I'm just gonna add that, every situation is different in some way, right? And the ordinances don't always work the best. What works the best is conversations, right, and negotiation and finding the compromise. The compromise is the thing that just pisses everyone off a little bit, and there's no winners and there's no losers, but everyone agrees to, right, live as neighbors in whatever capacity and do what they need to do, and that's the balance, right? That's what is hard to do, but is, I think, the most effective. And as the circumstances change around you, right, you're having to change with that. And so the blunt tool of a sound ordinance isn't always the answer. It can be certainly, but it's mostly, right, the ability for you with, if there's a partner in the city, to help find that compromise.
And we've actually done some of that with some businesses, with STVRs that have moved right next to an entertainment establishment and worked out those mediations. And there's also this, Eddie just reminded me about the agent of change, that if, the last person that moves there is the one that has to make the change. If you've been established there for 25 years doing your work, so there are lots of different tools in the toolbox, but it's time, we've got to do this. It's way past time for us to do it. Jim?
Yeah, thank you very much. I just saw two members walk out the door who the church said they were from Social Club, which means they were probably in a bar or a restaurant type environment. I would like to talk about safety in terms of alcohol training. I've been confused for last year. Initially, when the city council voted to retain RHI, it was, well, I understood, it was to improve nightlife safety in the Savannah area. Then, nearly a year later, they voted to pass a city ordinance, which really wasn't presented to the community. And once they voted on it, it was passed within 5 minutes. So I don't know if it's really legal or illegal, but we have members on the city council who are attorneys. We had a city attorney sitting there who should have known if it's legal or illegal. We had a mayor sitting there. He conducted enough meetings to know if it was legal or illegal. But personally, I have a problem with that type of thing. And once it was passed, it was told to us, one, that the training would be free. I don't know what's free. I've never gotten anything free. And the second thing was, should it be repealed? Should we keep it like it is? What's the responsibility of the city council to do the right thing? Since that time, I've been fortunate and the people in the revenue department I dearly love. But are we where we need to be on safety? Now, several meetings I've had, it tells me that probably we're not going to be safe in what we're doing now. Because since this is what, July, August, since October 1922, when the new ordinance was first proposed. And then in January 26th, when the city council voted on it, I'm not sure if anything's really been done, because the city council voted on having a training program, and that was 9 months ago. I think it was the original date was March 1st, and we're already in July. I understand that part of the training program is going to allow someone taking the exam to fail it as many times as they want to, and it's more or less a fail until you pass that program. Now, this is what we want in the city of Savannah. We certainly don't want in the high school to pass until you fail. But in order to make Savannah safe, we have to train the people, not just issue a certificate so they can work.
Well, Mr. Deal, I can't speak directly to, the ordinance changes. I do recall the public involvement with that prior to that going before council. And I know that the revenue department is working on all of that, and they've been working very hard. Judy and Jennifer Blaylock and their teams to put that together. And she's hosting 3 meetings next week. And Judy, before we end, what did I say now? They're the 17th, 18th, and 19th, is that right? Okay. The 17th, 18th, and 19th, some alcohol stakeholder meeting where you can have these varied discussions with the experts. And so I would encourage you to look on the website because that gives where they'll each be, right?
Can we get an
Oh,
update?
Dr. Blaylock has the flyers, great. So we can get those out to folks. So that you can have those specific questions answered that I don't have the expertise to answer. I wouldn't want to miss things.
Susan, thanks to you and the staff for all of your time and effort. Hello, Savannah.
Hello.
It's a pleasure to see all of you here this evening, this afternoon. Listen, this is a very, very expensive body of work. This is very important work. It's work that Jim Deal and I have essentially been presenting since my time in office. And it's refreshing and encouraging to see that a lot of the work and talent he brings to the table and a lot of the expertise that I've offered is mimicked here. The only missing pieces is the political will to actually do the work, but to do the work in a smart way, to be proactive. I want to say to the citizens here today that we are in full support of our police officers. And I want to say that our police officers, where this work is concerned, they are grossly disadvantaged. And that the bearing capacity of our current force today and since our time in office and before is grossly deficient. We have been down more than 100 police officers each year, and this year we're down more than we ever have been. And when we continue to extend liberality for alcohol establishments on top of alcohol establishments and forego the offering of training that can be paired with some of the other elements you offer here, we put them at a disadvantage. And so unless and until we can really get our force to where it should be, based on not only the Savannah population, but our student population, as well as the tourists and the visitors here to Savannah, we will not solve this problem. And it's unfortunate that our bar and liquor serving establishment owners are continuously tasked year after year, depending on who's in office, with these very fluid changes. And so I just want to say that you all are essentially just directed to do what you're told. And so we respect that. But I just wanted to have those honest conversations today. So while we're hopeful, we still need to have some real actionable steps to take care of the foundational pieces. Otherwise, we're just going to continuously be where we are. Thank you all for your time, and I really appreciate this engagement. Alderwoman Lanier.
Thank you so much, Bernetta Lanier, Alderwoman of the 1st District, which includes the arena, downtown expansion, Eastern Ward, all of that is in the 1st District. So we've been heavily impacted by these recommendations. I have a question and 2 comments. The question is based on the scope of this contract. Were you charged to look at downtown, nightlife downtown, or nightlife throughout Savannah?
Throughout Savannah.
Because what about the nightlife or the venues that exist outside of downtown? I didn't hear much about those, or if you're seeing recommendations you think will apply equally to those outside of downtown.
Thank you for bringing that up. And we were very cognizant of that. That was council's directive to us to be inclusive. And so one of the first ways we did that is we reached out to the neighborhood associations, the presidents, to help us get people to attend. We did have 4 meetings specific just to talk to. We did Tatumville and Fowler Park. We did Haversham Village. We did Harbor Village and West Savannah. I mean, I can't remember them all, but we invited all the neighborhoods to be a part of that. Now, the discussion sometimes was slightly different. So, for example, what I alluded to earlier with the arena district, we had a very interesting conversation there because, like I said, they're ripe for development and those residents are nervous about it. They're nervous about, what they picked me, but they're nervous about potential STVRs or potential nighttime businesses opening up to support the arena, things, auxiliary services. And so what they want to do, as they told me, is they want to make sure that they're continue to be involved because as the potential development happens, they need to be at the table with the developer of the city to make sure that it's not something that flies in the face of what they want in their community.
And that is the reason that for the last few years, I've been trying so hard to get a community benefit strategic approach as our strategic plan for the city. And that will allow you as residents to form these alliances and submit community benefit agreements. That's all these promises that you're receiving and what you want to see happen will be in a contract. And if that contract is broken, everyone else is litigious, you'll have an opportunity to sue because we have received so many empty promises throughout these decades about this will happen to that. That will get you more involved and more at the table. The gentleman mentioned sound, and thank you for that because that's another thing that I have been trying to bring to the forefront for some years now. What we are experiencing is commercial and industrial intrusion, and that brings the noise. I live on Hudson Hill, and whenever there's something happening down at Plant Riverside, it's like down the street. It's right on the river. We both right on the river, and I can hear that noise on the weekend at my home, but soon it will be drowned out by the noise from the port and the new container port and the new breakbulk port. So we'll have some more noise issues if you go downtown. And I live maybe 2 minutes from City Hall if I catch all the lights. 5 minutes when the lights stop. But we're just that close, so we also experience the noise that we're hearing. The last thing I want to mention is that because of the history and the culture in Savannah, on the foundational piece, we need equity to be at the foundation. In Savannah, we have to have equity at the foundation. It can't be that equity piece. It can't be, we want to add equity here and there because we talk a lot about equity, sustainability, and all of these revitalization and stuff. But we don't really put those into our policies so we can see those. So if we're going to have a foundation of certain scope and the measures of this analysis, then we definitely have to have equity at the foundation as a guiding principle.
Thank you for saying that. And I did want to ask one other small question, which was about these applying to those other areas, those other nightlife areas, these action steps, application to those. And I said that the conversation was a little bit different. So if you live in, say Carver Village or Haversham Woods or wherever there's a cluster of nightlife, or there's that potential development, like the arena, that's where this kind of process in this office can assist to make sure that you have a seat at the table when development potentially comes, to make sure that you help craft what you want your community to look like. And really, ultimately, that's what those conversations were like with those residents. Making sure they understood that they're a part of this process and that this isn't a one-time thing. This is a long-term relationship that we're going to be committed to. So some of them do apply, some of them, it was a different conversation, but a very good conversation about what they want. Yes, sir. Hey.
Steve Mott here. First, I want to thank you for endorsing and working so it's been amazing to not have trolleys going by before 10
Glad.
It really was. I didn't think it was a battle worth fighting, but just having that extra 2 hours of quiet each day. Really nice. Question here is, there was a tourism management plan. Is that still in effect?
Yeah. In fact, this study was this study came out of a recommendation that was made.
So that plan is still actively being worked on?
So the Tourism Advisory Committee, which is the mayor and alderman appointed committee that kind of oversees as the sounding board for tourism, they actually, we've done several of the steps in the tourism management plan. It's probably time that we revisit and reprioritize some of those things and check off those things that we do. Yes, sir.
Hi, Susan. Hi, Christiana Turner, homeowner in the historic district, living on one of the squares. We know that we are living in a museum, okay? We understand that. I want to do two things. First, thank the Savannah Police Department for all their efforts in keeping us safe. We realize that y'all are understaffed, and we respect that. And also, thank you, Susan, for this opportunity to speak. I really was planning on coming back tonight, but Sites and Monuments has an important agenda item that I'm going to be talking to later. I just had a couple points. I haven't had a chance to absorb this yet, like everybody else in this room. So I just wrote what was important to me as a homeowner in the Landmark District. The Office of Nightlife, when we have an issue with the tour bus, I have to go videotape the tour bus. And you know, the mayor always offers to step in, but what I generally do is call the tour office and say, look, I'm calling you first, and if this happens again, then I'm going to the top. And they usually quiet down. It's usually the ghost tours at night coming around our square. So I like the Office of Nightlife idea. I like the dedicated nightlife police unit, even though I don't think it has to be a police unit per se, but they need to have the power to arrest and stop whatever's happening. The lighting assessment, I mean, our square, as you know, is pretty well lit, but I get a lot, especially when I was on the DA board, I get a lot of feedback about lighting in downtown. And I won't even tell you the addresses because you've heard it before. The STVRs. I don't know where to begin. When we moved to the living museum called the Landmark District, we didn't know that we were going to have all these people coming in for very short-term stays. Fortunately, in our area, what I do is I make a point to get to know the owners, so they know if I have a problem, I'm calling them first, and then I'm going to report them. So a lot of it, y'all, living downtown as a small town North Carolina girl, is about communicating with your neighbor first, and then look for another avenue to try to solve whatever the conflict is. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
While we have a quiet moment, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Alderwoman Miller Blakely was here also earlier. I think she had to step out, but I wanted to recognize that she was still here. Oh, there you are. Like Brett. Brett's big head is right in front of you. Sorry about that.
Good afternoon. I just want to make myself clear about the expansion of the downtown. You're saying downtown nightlife, but there was something that was out some time ago about the expansion of nightlife, and I'm wondering, where is that expansion going to be? And have you all decided how far you will expand that? Because just like some of the other residents are stating, I'm very close to downtown as well. And if it starts expanding over to where I am, then a lot of lighting and some of the same issues that we have downtown would also have to be spread out to other areas.
Yes, ma'am. So there's no plan for extension of downtown or of nightlife. Now, right now, the city has. There are probably private developers that are looking at our community and thinking about what they want to do. The point of this is to make sure that when and if a developer looks at a property that is, let's say, not in the core entertainment area, closer to a neighborhood, what we want to make sure of is that from the as soon as we can, make sure that those residents are part of the conversation about that. So that your ideas and goals and what you want for your community is at the top of the priority list. Just, he or she will have a property right as a property owner, but we all have to live together. And this office will allow, this strategy will allow us to be more proactive about it. And those are a lot of the conversations that we have with neighborhoods that don't have a lot of nightlife right now, but could potentially at some time. But there is no plan, I want to be clear on that.
Susan?
Yes, ma'am.
Where is the entertainment district right now? What streets is that included?
So we don't have a defined area. This is one of the things that we want to do as part of that sound discussion, because what could be appropriate in an entertainment area for sound, it wouldn't be appropriate in your backyard, right? So, but primarily when we look at it, we think about, you know, Liberty North. And then we look at Whitaker to MLK, with little, you know, bump outs here and there, especially from River Street, Eastern York. And now, of course, even further west than Plant Riverside, we have things happening there. So when people say the entertainment district, that's usually where they're talking about, but we don't have anything defined here. Does that make sense?
Okay, so there isn't really a district. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am.
Interesting, because the verbiage is always the entertainment district. So we need to be more specific. If it's not a district, then we don't need to be calling it what it is not. Now, how does the Starland area, is that a district or is that just the Starland area?
People use the words interchangeably. Some people call it a district. I'm looking at the folks that live there. Some people call it a district, some people call it an area, depending. But there's never been a definitive just naming of that area. We have Thomas Square in that neighborhood and other neighborhood associations, but they're never. Jason, would you like to address?
Would you like me to address that real quick?
I would love for you to.
This is a favorite topic of conversation.
I got this back.
So everyone uses the term Starland, everybody's familiar with it. I can tell you one thing it is, and that's the Starland Dairy. And so it kind of emanates from that. And different people have different ideas about where it ends. But basically, we like to say that it exists within Thomas Square, which is more of a defined thing, the Thomas Square Streetcar National Historic District. So, but then the Starland name is kind of a little fuzzier, so it's kind of wherever you think it is. But it's definitely that area where Starland Dairy is and stuff around it. And then some people may think it extends all the way up and down Bull Street from Forsyth to Victory, but it's kind of, again, it's a fuzzy concept.
So Susan, because of what I'm hearing and the residents are saying that the noise is bothering them, the sounds is bothering them, maybe we need to, our office, your office, need to get with the realtors and let the realtors know that when you're selling property in this area, this is what you're gonna be faced with. Because a lot of times people come and they don't know what's happening in that area, and then when they get there, you know, it's like, it's a nuisance to them, but this is where you actually moved at.
Right.
So, you might wanna consider something like that.
Thank you. And you know, sometimes people move, let's say, to Starland because they think it's gonna be a hip, cool place to be. They get there and decide it's too loud. Well, it is what it is. The community is what it is. Long before you live there.
Within the historic district, there are commercial areas that
Hang on
can be
one
used for commercial
Can you hang on one second, because I couldn't hear you and I want to hear you.
Within the historic district, there are areas that can be developed commercially. There are areas that are residential. So I think with this entertainment area, it's just in the commercial zones within the historic district. A lot of us here are in residential areas. You can't even open a coffee shop on a residential street without the neighborhood approval. So we're
Well, like
getting,
you said, you just need to communicate.
so it's,
You know?
Savannah has a map, the city has a map that shows all the overlays, all the residential areas, all the commercial areas.
So if I can just interject,
And
you're,
what is allowed is kitchen.
yeah, you're talking about your zoning, right? So the base of this, right, is about zoning. So if the council or a community want changes to, or more delineation, right, there's a process for that. And in San Francisco, again, our work is primarily about nighttime, right? There is methodologies to, if there's a system in place to go through, like an Office of Nightlife or something similar, to ensure that there's right people, right place, right thing, right place. That's like the basis, right, of this conversation is around zoning. So you can do these like lines and outlines of where is this appropriate, where is that appropriate, and through zoning, or, right, it can be more organic, but we in San Francisco created a system by which we do take developers to task if they want to come and bring, right, something new into an area, typically residential, into a place that's loud, and require them to do notice and to do the things you're talking about, right? So people are aware and do sound studies before they build something that says, this is how this building needs to be built based on how loud it is, not at 2 in the afternoon, but at Saturday night at 2 in the morning, 1 or 3, when everyone's moving around and so you have to build a better building in addition to right people, right place, if that makes sense.
Also, wasn't this about resident disclosure?
Sure, I don't want to go super deep, but there is something, right, called the agent of change principle that speaks to this idea of putting, like building a better building and having the right people in the right place.
Okay, so we have, this is on. You got hear me?
Yeah, well, maybe not.
Is this on? Yeah. So we have one more question here. We're approaching 2:30. I have a few closing comments, so go ahead, sir, and then I'll.
This gentleman right here,
Yes, sir.
Mr. P, he should be involved in all your decision making.
He's hiding.
No, because he's over Parks and Recreation. I'm sorry, he's over Parks and Rec.
That's right.
Got sorry.
That's right.
But this is one of the people, this is what I'm saying. I think you put together the best that you possibly can, but the folks that actually do the work, like the police officers that actually roll the beat, and people like the gentleman behind me, and Ms. Turner, I think you did an excellent job to go forward and actually present some type of action plan. You see that a lot of things. What's the one that goes to those things would make us really work, because what I've seen, you can shoot somebody in Savannah, the police will show up, but if a person snatched in downtown, you get a SWAT team. So it's the priority of the dollars and the developers. But now it's not the folks that are coming, not the killer bees who I refer to as the scab pieces, get slapped in the hand and you get SSUs turn on a whole other set of circumstances and just tell you what I've been told. The work you're doing is very important. We really need in-person change.
Thank you. And so I want to close with just a couple of remarks. One, if you got a name tag, it has a QR code on it. Here's a QR code that takes us to all this information and our contact information. And a big takeaway for me of this is a recommended action plan. Okay? These are recommendations. You just said it really well, sir, when you said we need all these people to do the work. Because if there's an office of nightlife, they're going to facilitate that work happening. But it's going to take all the different city departments and nonprofit organizations and the community to come together to do this work. So, we will take this plan, we'll be presenting it to city council during the workshop, we'll get their feedback, and then we'll move forward. We'll put together an advisory committee, we'll bring the community back to tell you what we're doing, and I think at a minimum, we're gonna host once a quarter big meetings like this where we talk about these initiatives, and you hold us accountable. So thank you for your time and your effort and your energy. Come back at 6 o'clock if you want to hear me talk again. If not, please feel free to give us a call or email.